So, good evening everybody. For those who came in late, my name is Venerable Khemavaro, and I've been spending the rains retreat the last 4 months at Wat Buddha Dhamma, which is at Wiseman's Ferry. It's about 2.5 hours north of Sydney. It's a very old monastery. We started, I think, one of the first Theravada forest monastery, started by Venerable Kantipalo and Ajahn Khemavaro, both very famous teachers in their rights. And we started about 30 years ago. And unfortunately, Venerable Khemavaro, that's me, Kantipalo, disrobed in 1992. And during the time, the support fell away. And then in order to continue as a center, they turned it into a meditation center, where it had different teachers teaching there. And now recently, upon our arrival, myself and Venerable Bodhicitta, the director decided just to give a monastery another go, to transfer it back to being a forest monastery. So we'll see what happens the next 2 years. Everything's kind of in a trial period. But the only thing, impression, things that come up to the top of my head right now is just happy just to be back here, because I spent 8 years at the Bodhinyana Monastery and in Perth, and happy just to be back here seeing very many familiar faces of people who supported myself and supported the monastery for all these years. And over in the East, it's interesting, even though Perth is a small town, and sometimes being in the monastery all these years, I take our wonderful the support that we get from the lay community sometimes for granted, because so much Ajahn Brahm, there's so much teaching, and people come with so much faith and devotion to the monastery that sometimes as a junior monk we don't do much teaching and much interaction, and we take it for very granted. But then you go to the East, and there's lots of teaching, lots of lay people teaching, and lots of monks running around. But I wonder, how much of that is kind of real Buddhism. A lot of, sometimes in the West, it's very fashionable. It's called, buffet Buddhism. You take the bits that you like, and you leave the bits you don't like. And everything's mixed together. And then with any large buffet, you take too much, you get indigestion. And sometimes I see that in the East. A lot of confusion, and hot teacher comes in, they go, and then, another new teacher comes, they go, and then everybody's teaching from their own experience. And then sometimes it gets very confusing, which method to choose, which teachers to follow, should I go to the Mahayana, the different traditions, the different schools? And I see that, that confusion that people come to me with. And it reminds me of a nice simile that kind of one of the meditation master, a Thai meditation master, who visited, Bodhinyana a few years ago. He gave this, it's like, the path. The path to Nibbana, the path to peace and freedom. It's like digging a well. There's water underneath, but it's 50 meters long. And, with most of us, or some of us, a lot of people just scratch on the surface of the ground. And they don't get any water. And they go somewhere else and they scratch a little bit more. No water there either. Right? But then some people go a bit deeper. Maybe they dig for a meter. And they look, no water. And then they dig maybe down to 5 meters. And look again, no water. And some people may do this, 10 holes, 20 holes, 50 holes. Maybe 5 meters, maybe 10 meters. And there's no water. And they run around telling everybody, see, I tried this path. I tried, this guy telling me that there's water underneath, and I dig it. And I've been digging for 50 holes, or more than that. And no water. And then what the teacher said is, that's part of the problem. You haven't gone deep enough. It's the same thing with, any kind of school. Just, any kind of meditation method. The thing with most of us, I like to encourage people to do, is to stick with one method. Stick with one school. Obviously, know whether that one works for you or not, but also to do it wholeheartedly. To really practice. You're doing the breath, really focus on it. Really give it all your effort, 100%. Over, months, maybe years even. And then see whether that works for you or not. But if every time a new teacher comes and you follow him or her, it might be interesting, and then there's always that factor of excitement of seeing new things. But over the long term, it's not going to bear too many results. And luckily, I've been fortunate enough just to be in the Thai forest tradition, and I find myself that I haven't had the need to look elsewhere, because for the simple reason that when something's working, why change? And I'm getting lots of happiness and lots of peace from just watching my breath and just studying a little about the teachings of the Thai forest tradition, and I see results, and I'm inclining towards peace, and I'm quite content, not having to look around. I know I'm starting to teach for the last couple of years, and that's always been the thing I get from different people. It says, well, you start to teach, then shouldn't you know all the different traditions so that you can explain it and that you can tell other people? But I think my approach to it is that there's many teachers out there, very capable teachers in all traditions, and that they are very adept in explaining their own schools, and they're very adept and very capable of explaining their own methods, and that I think we have to specialize in any marketplace. Stick with the strength, stick with what I do well, which is simple forest practices, watching the breath or the sweeping the body, and explain how that process through my my mind. And then if you like it, you come and you learn. If it doesn't suit you, there are many other teachers around, and that they can also teach you different methods. But I think there's no need to be everything to everybody. Just stick to one thing and do that well. So in terms of being a monk, stick to being a monk, follow all my rules, and do that well. And hopefully just by being a simple monk who focuses on meditation, inspire other people to do the same thing. Right? But that's not to say that obviously that meditation is the only way to approach the Buddhist teaching. There's there's lots of other approaches. To study the suttas and to have other kind of specialization. That's also okay. And that's the thing that I noticed, because in the modern times, because so much information available, a lot of people just spend their time reading it and comparing different schools. And while it has some uses, I think in the long term, reading, studying, like Ajahn Brahm said, books are just like menus, right? You read the menus and don't taste the food, you'll never be full. And books just point to the truth. You don't close the book and you don't meditate, you'll never know what peace feels like, what true peace is. Obviously, some studying is needed. But I think in the long term, it's just the sitting and the meditation gets you there. But then people are thinking, well, yeah, sometimes I'm very busy. Why should I meditate? I've got things to do. Very hectic life, full-time job, family, and meditation is going to add yet to another list of things to do. And I just want to encourage people that it doesn't have to be very long. It could be a short routine that you set up 10 minutes in the morning or 10 minutes at night. And as long as you incline your mind towards peace, you'll find that the rest of the day, the rest of your activity, will also have that as a background. You look towards peace, and then peace starts to open up, and it pervades all your activities. And the thing that I noticed when I was out at Wat Buddha Dhamma, being more of a senior monk, that there is a slight shift in the focus of my practice. That obviously Bodhinyana, the emphasis is on meditation and sense restraint. Ajahn Brahm, very generously does all the teaching. As a relatively, even middle monk, I just go back to my room and devote a lot of time to meditation. So a lot of my focus is on peace. But then when you're the senior monk, there's a shift because there's a lot more interaction. And when you interact with committees, interact with teaching different people, there are people who obviously praise you to the skies. Oh, you're the best thing that ever hit Sydney. Well, they never said that actually. They say, oh, you're great. And then there are other people saying, you guys are, just lazy, good for nothing. Theravada is always, going on and on and on about, discipline, about the rules, and you can't do this, you can't do that. People have to drive you around because you don't want to drive yourself, and you have to cook for you. And it's like very, very high maintenance, as my sister tells me. It's like, guys, you guys are so precious. But, so you get both way. And the thing is just to remember that these comes and go, and it is a good practice in kind of remembering, have the mindfulness to bring up, that praise and blame come and go. And the thing is just to not be moved, not to get really excited if you get a nice compliment, but also not get to really depressed, dejected, insecure if they start to blame you for different things. Just to know that, okay, I'm trying, doing the best I can, inclining towards peace, inclining towards kindness. And sometimes people may take it the wrong way, and just to know that, okay, that's just the way it is. These things come and they go. And that to use it in my practice. Because it's true, it's very nice and easy, relatively easy to be peaceful in Bodhinyana. Lay people, great support. And the hut, very beautiful, very, very quiet. But it's only when you encounter these worldly dhammas of gains and loss, of happiness and suffering, of praise and blame, that you see how deep that peace is. Like Ajahn Chah was saying, in one rains retreat, did a lot of meditation, didn't even look at a woman because he had a problem with lust. And it felt lots and lots of peace, the whole rains retreat. And then after the rains retreat comes the ceremony, the Katina ceremony, where lots of lay people will come to the monastery to offer the robes and requisites. And he said, one look at this lady in red, the whole thing's gone. So then he realized, okay, peace is nice, but wisdom is actually much deeper. That's when you find out how deep the peace is. And at that time in his practice, he said, his peace was not very deep. And that's the thing that as getting more senior, to always be noticing. That obviously, I think I'm a relatively peaceful monk, but it's true. It's only when you come into contact with some pleasant things, when you come into contact even with pleasant things, that you watch your mind to see how it moves, to see where the movement is. And then to be honest, okay, I'm still being moved by this, so, set up mindfulness. The thing I remember was that going to what Buddha Dhamma, it has another nickname, what most people know. It ends with drama. And because over the years, the fact that it was, like I said, a meditation center, open to all different traditions, it may, in theory, sound, very kind of open-minded, open heart, everybody comes in. But the thing with all, everything goes is that there's no unity. Everybody's got different factions, and you get to be very divisive sometimes. A lot of criticism, backs and forwards, and so it's got lots and lots of dramas in the past. And knowing this already, and had plenty of warning from both Ajahn Brahm, the senior monks I talked to, Ajahn Sujato, and all the lay community who've been there, saying, you really want to do this. And the only reason I thought, to kind of go there was I did visit it in May for 10 days, and it's just physically a spectacular place, but also and emotionally, some kind of emotional attachment, like I must have been there or something, because everything felt like it was like almost a fantasy come true. And obviously, monks are not trying to indulge in too much fantasy, but it's like it's in the middle of a national park, 200 acres, and to drive there is 15 kilometers of dirt road. And for me, and then during the drive, it's very beautiful, surrounded by rolling hills and mountains. And for me, the road is a great simile, like literally leaving the world, everything behind you, all the noise and the hustle bustles of life, right behind. And in front of you, it's just surrounded by just kind of very green bushland, very beautiful. And it's weird because even the trees, just curves the right way. Everything is, green. It's, the leaves are much greener there than it is here. The flowers are more beautiful. And I remember because I was leaving Bodhinyana Monastery, that we have kind of yellow wattles there, I think. And they really, it was blooming. It's like, I'm going to miss this. I've been here 8 years, and for some reason really like the trees. And then when I was at Buddha Dhamma, guess what the first thing I saw? The water trees everywhere. So it's something felt very right. And the only other kind of experience I had was that the same thing happened when I went to the Wat Pananachat in Thailand. First time in the monastery. I was brought up a Catholic, so not really religious. But then came in the monastery and had this feeling the same, like, coming home, been here before, or been to similar places, and just felt really, like, oh, this is really nice feel to it. And it's the same thing with Buddha Dhamma. And that's the reason why, obviously, I like to think that I'm rational and weigh all the pros and cons. But underneath that is this kind of emotional thing that in my stomach says, this is the right place. Yes, it is a mess. And it hasn't been visited and not well supported because it's very far outside of town. But I had this thing that, things might work out after all. And that's the reason why I went and to spend the rains there. And in the beginning, I thought I had to go by myself because Ajahn Brahm was very concerned. He said, it's not going to work. You're wasting your time. So I'm not going to send any monk to go help you. But then eventually, Ajahn Brahm, being very kind, relented. He sent another younger monk to keep me company. So when a bodhicitta, very brave, came and to stay the rains with me, and there are lots of jokes with the monks about how much I would have to fast because there's no support. I say, oh, you think you're skinny now? Wait until we see you in 3 months. But none of that happened. Luckily, things did come together. There was plenty of support from traditional Buddhists. Once the Thais and the Vietnamese community found out that there were monks there, they were coming on the weekends and bringing lots and lots of cartloads full of danas, full of food for us to have. And there is a caretaker, a manager there, so he would cook the food during the week. So all these issues about not being well supported, luckily, was resolved very quickly. But in terms of, I remember just coming from Bodhinyana Monastery, I don't know what, I think most of you have been there. It is a 5-star monastery. Very beautiful, very well built by the monks and by Ajahn Brahm, who spent years and years building it. And so, obviously I had the good fortune to stay there for 8 years. And I knew, but even in perfect monastery, well, near perfect monastery, I noticed that there is plenty of suffering involved. But I'll get to that later. In terms of Buddha Dhamma, I knew that going for it, that it was far, far from perfect. But I made this resolution. I told myself that I'm not going to suffer in this situation. I trying to be as mindful as I can, not just suffer over the conditions of the kutis, or there's lots of rumors about lay support not being there, lots of rumors about the committee themselves not being supportive. I said, whatever comes, I'm not going to suffer over this. And when things come that it wasn't, that wasn't going my way, I just say, okay, yeah, this is, I expected this. I will be happy, whatever's happening. As long as I spent the rains peacefully, I didn't have to break my reins, I didn't have to, starve. Food came, it was great. It didn't have to be my favorite food, it didn't have to be anything. As long as I had something to eat, it was good. And I thought to myself, as long as my kutis wasn't leaking, it was great. And in that kind of expectation, I had a really, really good pansa because the expectation was so low. Whereas reverse, going back to Bodhinyana Monastery, a near perfect monastery, like say a 5-star monastery, I would be sometimes in the past rains, walking on my, walking path, saying, man, this is a nice walking path, but it's only 18 meters long. If it were 20 meters long, it would be perfect. And little things like that. Ajahn Brahm is a great teacher, by far the wisest, by far, the most kind and gentle teacher in English, that I know. But yet, a few more, a few too many jokes, Ajahn. If you had a few less jokes, you'll be perfect. So things like that, the little things, but pretty soon it ends up like, well, actually he's doing that wrong, and his robe is not very neat, and there's this and that other stuff. You're like sitting in your kuti, scratching your head, and bringing a lot of suffering to yourself because of this kind of things will be perfect if. And that's why I want to share with most people here that just to watch the mind when those things come up, and that actually to go in the opposite direction. That whatever is happening, say, I'm not going to suffer over this. I'm not going to suffer over, the the demanding husband I have. I'm not going to suffer over my demanding wife. I'm going to be happy with whatever's happening. I'm not going to suffer over my bad boss. I'm not going to suffer, the fact that I lost 40% in the stock market last week. Whatever's happening, I'm going to be happy. Because we can always reflect, appreciating what we have already. Even if your whole portfolio melted away last week, you still, everybody here, live in Perth, Australia, a very peaceful place, very plentiful. No one is starving, no one's homeless. Not yet anyway, right? But just appreciating what we have already makes things a lot more, a lot more nice, a lot more easy to deal with and to put up with. And that's the thing with contentment. You can't go wrong with contentment. It's the path to peace, but also it's an end. Being happy wherever's happening, whatever you have, is built on the present happiness. Also, goes towards the future happiness. Contentment. Always appreciating what we have already, and not looking for that extra. Even if you had a near perfect, relationship, and you start thinking things will be perfect if he or she does this or that, then just to know that, okay, we're asking for trouble, go in the wrong direction. And one of my favorite stories about contentment is that, and I have to keep attributing this to the source, was that it actually came from a Catholic priest that I visited my parents are still Catholic, and my mother and father are very active in the church actually. They go to the church and every day. So when I visited my parents a few years ago in Los Angeles, I went to church with them a few times. So I think it was the first time I had this great opportunity to listen to a sermon by one of the priests. And his story was also about contentment, appreciating what God gives you already instead of asking for more. And the story goes something like this, was that in one of the neighborhood in Los Angeles, there was this priest who did some exercise. Early in the morning, he would jog around the block a few times just to get some exercise before going off to do his mass and work or something. And he just moved to this neighborhood, and his first week, he saw this little boy who was in one of the corner selling bagels in the early morning, selling bagels to people walking to work or something. Yeah. And he noticed it was quite early in the morning, so not too many people walking by. So he felt sorry for the boy. The boy wasn't just not getting too many customers. So sometimes, so when he jogged by the boy, he would toss him 2 quarters and smile and just wave, and he kept going. And the little boy saw that. He said, "Oh, okay." He didn't know what the priest wanted, but he said, just kept the 2 quarters. And this happened, a few weeks later as well. Every time, he jogged by the boy, he would throw him 2 quarters, smile and wave, and keep jogging. And this happened for a couple of years actually. Every time he saw the boy, he just tossed him 2 quarters. So a few years later, when he did that one day, he jogged by the boy, threw him 2 quarters, and the boy waved and waved him down. And the priest just turned around, just slowed down his jogging, and said, I bet you're wondering why, all these years, every time I jog by you, I throw 2 quarters and never stop for my bagels. I keep on running. And the boy very actually smiled and said, no, that's not why I stopped you this morning. I stopped you this morning was that to tell you that, today the price of bagel went up to 60 cents. And that's the story about contentment. That's what we always, we don't appreciate what we already have in our hands. We always want that extra bit. And that extra bit sometimes feels logical enough. That it's normal to want more things. It's normal to, want that promotion. It's normal to want that extra, normal to want your spouse or your partner to be, a little bit more understanding, better cooks or whatever, more prompt, not to be so late. But, that's where the suffering starts. The Buddha said, second noble truth, suffering comes from craving. So when you have a craving or wanting, even if it's a subtle, even if it's just a little thing, you are separated from your happiness already, because you want something that you don't have. And that's the definition of suffering. So just to make sure that we always go in the opposite direction, always inclining towards contentment, always inclining towards appreciating what we have already. And when we start with the world around us, appreciating what we already have in terms of partners, in terms of situations, in terms of your jobs, then you can also start using the same inclination of the mind to appreciate your own, abilities. Whether you are, healthy or not. Body is good enough. We don't expect the body to be healthy all the time. We know that old age, sickness, and death is inherent in having a body. We know it also with the mind, that sometimes the mind is bright and happy, and sometimes it's dark, sometimes it gets anxious and fearful. But just to know that, that's also good enough. And to remind ourselves of the Dhamma. Things come and they go. And the thing is just to see it for what it is. It's impermanent conditions that come and go. And to make a resolution, incline towards, always, I'm going to be happy no matter what. And this kind of clarity of thought can be brought about by meditation, by having a peaceful mind, having a calm mind. Because a lot of times, we live in a very fast-paced world, and calmness and stillness is not easy to be had. But also to kind of remember, the Dhamma is something very magical, very powerful. The power of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. As long as we rely on it, as long as we reflect on it, it brings peace. And also to always kind of use certain reflections to judge our experience, to judge whether we move in the right direction or not. Like the Buddha said, if you are suffering, there's a craving there somewhere. Know why. From Buddhism point of view, all suffering in the mind, whether you have a weak body or strong body, any physical suffering and also mental suffering. Physical suffering, nothing we can do about, because the body does what it does. But the mental suffering in our minds, to know that we are responsible for it 100%. That anything in our minds, people yell at us, say mean things to us, then we get depressed and get angry over that. Just to know that, it's normal to get people, saying mean things to you. It's normal, sometimes they compliment you, sometimes they blame you. Know that's normal, but it's how we react to it, how we relate to it, makes all the difference. Right? We don't expect people to always say nice things. Then when they don't say nice things, there's not too much suffering, because we don't expect that. We expect a perfect world, then we get disappointed. So any disappointment is a sign that there's a grasping, a clinging, a wrong view somewhere. But also know that because, most of us are not enlightened, that from time to time we do get into these dark spaces. From time to time, because we don't remember the Dhamma, we do bring sufferings upon ourselves. But once we recollect that, we can move towards to alleviate it, to let go of the suffering, knowing the suffering comes from because we are attached to something, we want something from life that it cannot give. And that's where a lot of it. And even for most meditators, a lot of suffering comes to meditation. Because we're unenlightened, we want to be peaceful. And that wanting we take into our meditation, we take into our practice. And wanting to be peaceful, it's more work, more doing, more craving. And it's, in a sense, it's pushing you towards peace. But just to know that, up to a point, the inclination towards peace should only push you onto the cushion or onto the walking path. After that, make sure the inclination is towards letting go, towards being. Just to be happy with whatever's happening. Just to watch and to appreciate whatever's happening in your body and mind. And we're called human beings, but it's actually a misnomer. We're actually human doings, because most of us, we don't know how to be still and just to be with things. We like to manage, to arrange, and to control things. Because of our, kind of inclination, conditioning, we think that's where happiness lies in. doing things. When I want to be happy, I have to do something. I want to be successful, I have to do something. And in a worldly sense, that's where things are moving. But I think when the Dhamma is, it's actually the opposite, and that's where it's so subtle, and that's where it's so tricky. And so with the Dhamma, it's actually being still, being with whatever's happening. And then the mind will be still on its own. It's when we let go, we surrender, we give up. That's where peace and happiness is. That's why, as a monk, we have this opportunity to really incline towards peace. Because the life of a monk is all about surrendering. Surrendering ourselves to the tradition. Surrendering ourselves to the rules. Surrendering ourselves to our teacher. To the situation. And in the beginning, when I didn't, sometimes, as a young monk, a lot of craving came up because it's just the nature of the beast. That when you come into a new, situation, and lots of rules, and then you push up against your craving, wanting, a sense of control that you think you have over your life. And I remember just being a monk, sometimes just, sitting here with, my hand in my head, and just thinking, why? What evil karmas I made to be in such a terrible tradition. Can't eat after 12, no music. I should have gone to the Tibetan, lots of smells and bells. This evil Thai tradition. Nothing to do in the forest. And also some of the rules at the time didn't seem very logical, right? You can eat as much sugar as you want, which, from growing up in LA, that's kind of, a terrible, evil poison. It's just like putting poison into my body, I'm thinking. But yet, you can't touch a fruit in the afternoon because, the rules was that you can have sugar but not fruit. And at the time, it didn't make any sense. And for me, I was, really chaffed against those kind of smaller rules. But after a while, I got the feel of it and understood that it's not whether the fruit or the sugar, whether it made any kind of objective sense, but it's about relinquishing, really surrendering yourself to the rules. You said that, the Buddha laid down the rules. He was perfectly enlightened. And if Ajahn Chah and Ajahn Brahm followed it, they were also very, very wise. And they can do it. So obviously, the thing for me to do is not to worry whether they make sense to me or not, but to surrender to the form, to surrender to the life in the monastery. And then as soon as that happened, that switch, then things became very, very peaceful. And it's the same, and that's why meditation, that's why, obviously, encourage people to really live in the monastery, to become monks and nuns, even for short whiles, to really understand where this meditation is pointing towards. Because it's all about surrendering. So giving up. And giving up not just what you think is right, but giving up the sense of the thing that's thinking, why should I give up? Giving up this thinking mind, the wanting mind. That's where the practice starts. Ajahn Chah said something very kind of dramatic. He said, if you haven't really cried 3 times, you haven't really bawled your eyes out 3 times, then you really haven't started practicing yet. Because sometimes the giving up the sense of self can be very frustrating. Because there's a craving, there's frustrations come from wanting, controlling. And the rules cut against that. Then, your defilements, your craving, you're not going to says, I don't like this. I should go something else. I should do something else. Go to a different tradition. Go, try a different method. But I think, monastery life and also meditation, it's all about surrendering. And once you surrender, there's a peace. Because it's also in accordance with Dhamma. Because the non-doing, the watching. Watching conditions arise, watching conditions fade away. Not having to react, not having to say to I don't have to put my comment. I don't have to like this or not like this. I'm just part of a process. Part of something bigger than, this thinking mind. And the only other thing I was thinking of bringing up was that living in, in seclusion in the forest, lots of people come and they always ask, there's only 3 of you here, and 220 acres, do you get very lonely? And it's actually, the opposite. Loneliness is more of a state of mind than anything. You can be very, very lonely and be with another person, with your partner, all the time. If there is kind of alienation, you're not getting along, you're fighting, then, I think Anton Chekhov said, a famous Russian writer said, you fear loneliness, don't get married. And it's the same, it is. You can see that loneliness, you can be alone and not be lonely. As monks, we're alone for many, many hours of the day. But I rarely, if ever, feel lonely. Because it's more how you relate to the situation, how we relate to ourselves. You're at peace with your strengths and your weaknesses. Then it's not so bad. You're not asking for anything else from people around you. You're not looking to affirm your views and opinions. Then being by yourself in the forest is very, very pleasant. And it's only going back sometimes to interact in the city that you really find out that, wow, the Buddha was right, that the five senses is literally on fire. So much impingement, especially now. If you walk into a mall, everything's jumping at you, smiling, winking, all sorts of funny things. And it's just, not very peaceful. But in the forest, wow, there's noise, but it's like part of the landscape. It just comes and goes, and it's not very obtrusive, not jumping at you. And also, for some reason, live in the forest, you feel like you're larger, just a member of a species, a member, another animal walking around, really, melting into nature. Whereas for some in the city, there's always this kind of encouragement to stand up, be different, and have a sense of self, and have views and opinions to share with your friends or something, even among monks. There's lots of speech. And from speech or any kind of interaction, there's a sense of self that springs from that. And when we grasp that sense of self, that's when kind of, a lot of the suffering comes from, because you want to protect it, defend it. But living in the forest, life is very, very simple. Once there's that switch, because many people, very good supporters, they come and they said, yeah, we love being in the monastery. We also love going back to our house. We love going back, and they said, we'll come from the monastery for a few days. But it says, no, it's just too lonely, it's too dark out here. No, the only thing maybe to close up with was that, it's just very pleasant and nice just to be back in the monastery, seeing familiar faces of friends and supporters. And that's the thing, the final thing I was going to bring up is that, there's lots of theories about how wise Ajahn Brahm is, and because he's a very, deep meditator and a wise teacher. And some people say, well, some people come with a barami of, Ajahn Brahm has been developing his practices over many, many lifetimes. And that may be true. But my own personal theory is that it's actually the opposite. It's like, everything is related. It's causes and condition. And that, because the fact that Ajahn Brahm is so wise, and Ajahn Brahm is so pure-minded, pure-hearted, it's because, there's this conditionality of you are what you eat. And I'm not just saying the wonderful food that people bring to the monastery, but it's also the love and devotion that people put into making the food. And when he's eating that, it's not just the health, quantity, but it's just the mental energy, mental purity that people put into it. And I think the reason why in Perth we have such a wonderful, monks, head monk like Ajahn Brahm, pure-hearted, because of the devotion of the lay community. Coming years after years, over 20 years, you're eating only healthy, or eating only kind of wonderful, kind intention. You're eating all this devotion from the people who come to the monastery to offer the food. Then over time, your mental qualities will also be showing that, with the result of that. We become more purified by the giver. And that's why sometimes I look at the East and you see a lot of cynicism. I see a lot of skeptical about regarding supporting Sangha or something. And that maybe is the reason why Perth is such a wonderful, kind of a Dhamma center for all of Australia. because of the support and the pure-heartedness of the lay community. And these are more reflections that I offer you for tonight, just in my travel, in my practice in New South Wales. And then hopefully some of you will make it there one day. So let's just leave that for your contemplation, to reflect on it, to use it for your own personal practice. And I think the highest respect you can pay to the Dhamma is to put into practice and use it for your own journey, your own happiness of the mind. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for coming. Is there any questions or comments? Yes. Okay, yes, sir. Okay, Robert first then, yeah.
I was wondering how you get on with the family when you say your parents are Catholics and they believe in God and you don't. How do you sort that out between you?
Yeah, we usually don't talk about religion too much. No, but also I would emphasize the commonality, what we have in common. And growing up Catholic, I had very good memories of it because the church sponsored us when we first moved to the U.S. as refugees, as immigrants. They were very generous, giving us lots of support, material support, and went to school for free and all that, Catholic school. So the generosity, the charity side of Catholics is amazing, and I'm still very grateful for all the support. So I just look at my mother, and she still does a lot of charity work. And like I said, we go into the church, obviously, it's out of devotion and out of gratitude for my own mother. They kneel, I kneel, it's, what I believe, whether it's then a all-powerful God, an eternal God, that's beside the point. I even went and, the Monsignor gave me a blessing, put a cross on my head. Yeah, okay. It's because you see the intention, really, whether, they're right or not, I think, when you looked at, like Ajahn Brahm said, the story about the farmers with the eggs, there's always, goodness out there somewhere, and just to look for that, incline towards that, and emphasize, our own common ground. And also, my mother in the beginning, when I told her my decision to become a monk, was obviously not very happy. I think when I went off to college, because we were pretty close, and when I went off to college to stay in the dorms, I told her I wasn't going to stay home, I want to stay in the dorm, and she kind of had tears in her eyes, because, oh no, you're growing up now, you're going to leave me. So that's when I told her I just moved into the dorm. And then my father said that when I told her that I was going to become a monk, he said, she didn't say anything. She said, oh, you're happy, I'm happy. But he said that she cried for a whole week. So it was fairly traumatic for my mother and my parents on the whole when I became a monk. But they visited me in the monastery in Thailand. And they also visited me when I was in Perth as well. And they saw, the kind of the simple lifestyle, the harmlessness and the purity of the life, not harming beings and really dedicating to training my mind. That after a while, they're quite happy now that I'm a monk. Especially, starting to teach people to meditate. And like I said, last time I went, I gave a brief talk about Buddhism and also gave a brief guided meditations to the people at the church. So they say they're quite appreciative of this. They say, oh, next time we come, we can do a longer course. So it's certainly, very open mind these days. Yeah. Sorry, what are you?
Ajahn, it was a lovely thought of yours that the positive energy of the lay people that we put into the food is helping the spread of the Dhamma and helping the monks to be positive in their practice. And it was very kind of you to share it with us. And I'd like to thank you for saying that.
No, that's very nice. I think it's, like I said, it's more of a pet theory of mine, but I think, it has some truth to that. Because it's true, everything is conditional, physical and mental. Right? Sorry? Yeah?
Sorry.
Go ahead, yeah, sorry.
If I can be happy anytime, anywhere, no matter what happens, isn't there a big risk that I accept too much, even if people treat me too bad?
Sorry, one more time. You could be happy anytime, anywhere, whatever's happening. Yeah?
Isn't there a great risk if people treat me really bad, I accept too much?
And the question is there a great risk that people treat you badly and you still would accept that? I think there is that slight risk that, sometimes the perception of Buddhists is that we're too apathetic. We don't kind of stand up and defend ourselves, for our rights. And but I think there is a risk in that sometimes, that people may treat you badly and like you're a pushover. But in my own experience, seeing the meditation teachers, how happy they are, and they are really pushovers. Ajahn Brahma is a big pushover, but the problem is that he's so soft, you can't push him because nothing to push against. And it's the same, I think, in terms of our own personal experience. That when I feel that I give people the benefit of the doubt, even when they say mean things, and they try to, they feel hostile. But I said, maybe they're having a bad day, maybe they don't mean the way they say it, how it comes out. When I say that, and kind of reflect on your experience, that yes, they could yell at you for 5 minutes, right? And then you give the benefit of the doubt, says, okay, maybe, he didn't mean what he said, he's having a bad day, and you drop it, because your intention is to be happy no matter what's happening. That whoever yelled at you was gone already, you're going to be happy right now. Then, that situation, the unpleasant situation is gone, right? You continue forward, neutral, happy, appreciating that the unpleasantness is gone. This person is not in front of you yelling at you again. But if you want to get even, and you say, that's wrong, I didn't do it, I'm going to tell them next time, I'm going to write a letter or this and that other stuff, then we carry this interaction with us day in and day out for many hours, many days, many weeks sometimes. And that's the cost of standing up for yourself or whatever, right? And that's the thing. And famous simile that one of the Thai meditation masters said about anger. That's anger exactly like that. Any anger, thoughts of anger, is that it's like picking up a red piece of hot coal and trying to throw at the other person, right? Sometimes you hit them and you hurt them, but a lot of times you don't. But what is always certain, 100% sure, is that you always burn your hand when you pick it up. And that's what anger is like. When we indulge in it, we feed it, we're burning. But last time we don't notice it, because we don't have the mindfulness. But that's why I encourage, to apply the Dhamma from peace. That you always be in sensitive, be in contact with what your body sensations are. And once you know that, anger is very unpleasant, a physical unpleasant sensation, either in the tightness of the chest, the tightness in the stomach. And then once you notice that, the mind will incline to letting go. Automatically. As long as we're aware of it. You're saying, okay, I'm angry right now. It doesn't matter why you're angry, just know that you're angry, and try to work on the physical, relaxing the body, breathing in, relaxing your chest, relaxing your stomach. And then you find out that just within a few minutes, you're not angry anymore. Because, one, you shifted the focus from looking outward to inside. And that's the problem. That's the thing with anger, is that it tricks us into looking at the trigger all the times. And it never looks into inside, how unpleasant it is. And then we keep up. Once you replay the conversation you had over and over again, he or she lied to me, abused me, mistreated me. Anger builds, up more and more. But once you turn around and look into the physical sensation, then it dies down slowly, because you're relaxing your body, and that also have a very calming effect on your mind. Yeah. But that's the thing I offer for your reflection, and to try out for yourself. See whether it works or not. Yeah. Okay. Okay, if there's no more questions, we can pay respect to the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha.